and welcome to week one. This is always an exciting and also a little nerve-wracking week for everybody as we're kind of trying to get our arms around what has to be done. It looks like my original uh, lecture was deleted, and I think that was me. We've got different accessibility requirements now, and I think I took that down thinking that I would redo it. But this gives me a chance to sort of expand how I would run the case. So let's take a look. So discussion one, case study to steer to go. Let's take a look at the case, and then we're going to really do the assessment. That's really what this case study is all about. Entrepreneurs find themselves in this position. They're like, okay, what am I going to do? And I've got a job or I've got an opportunity. You're going to find yourself one of two places. Either A, you'll be like me, where I was like, I had to be an entrepreneur because I didn't have any education at the time and I had no expertise, and I had more a bravado than brains. And so I'm like, well, I need to be an entrepreneur so I could be a CEO, right? So, which just sounds silly now, but the reality is that was just part of my DNA. And so, for me, it was I need to be an entrepreneur so that I can eat. But for most people, it is there is some sort of an opportunity that presents itself, and they get drawn in. In which case, there really is, an assessment, and there's two sides of the assessment, and most conversations really deal with the economic side of the assessment. Is this a good opportunity? Do we think we can make money? Do I think I have the expertise to do it? Along those lines. But there's the other side of the assessment, and that is sort of like the personal impact. And I can tell you, I've been married for over 30 years, and um, uh, my I have a startup wife, and it's kind of funny. My buddies, we've always joked, your startup wife is your first wife, which is rude to say. But my wife is a startup wife. My wife, from the very beginning, knew, that we would maybe have these feast or famine um, parts of our life, and we did. Right? We had, periods of time where, the startup wasn't going well, and we had other times where it's kind of like, we had a great exit, and so everybody's happy. But that personal side is really, really important, and tends to be much more impactful. So let's talk about this. So Mary, right? So she's been a sales rep for 7 years. It was her first job out of college, and she's identified a really good opportunity, and so she's gone through and assessed it economically, and it looks like over the course of 6 months, she can at least replace her income. And so, um, uh, and so the clients are six of them are on the East Coast, two of them are in the Midwest, and two of them are in California. Each of the jobs is going to take 10, 14 days. It's going to take about 2 weeks to do the installations. And then she's got to go back, right? And she's got to go back 2, 3 weeks later and do some refining and such. And so it looks like, and you do the math yourself, this is really an important part of the equation, is sort of running, the numbers within the case. It looks to me like she's going to be busy, pretty busy for somewhere between 22 and 24 out of 26 weeks. And but so let's take a look at that, right? So if I'm just going to open up a Word file and I'm going to say, okay, so let's assume, Mary graduated when she was 22, 23 years old. So that makes Mary 30 years old. Okay. What do we know about 30-year-old? And we have to go with females, right? So we know about 30 years. Does she have a partner, right? I'm going to bet she has a partner. And so are they married or are they, uh, in a committed relationship? What do we know, right? We don't know, but you get to decide. So when I run this case in the classroom, I've had students say, no, she's not married, but she's got a partner, or I've had one group of students. Yes, she's married and she's got two kids. It was like that completely took the case study in a whole other direction, because picture having two kids and now you're going to be gone for 22 out of, or 24 out of 26 weeks. What would that impact be like? And that completely changed the dynamic, but it's up to you, right? What I normally do is, does she have a pet? And I say, yeah, she's got a small dog. That changes the dynamic. Does she have siblings? Right. So let's assume she's the youngest, right? Just because, but you get to decide, right? She's the youngest. So she's got two older siblings. She's the youngest of three. And then does she have nieces or nephews, right? And say, yeah, she's got four. Let me see if I can spell nieces. There we go. Thank goodness for spell check. Four nieces and nephews. No, I guess I did not spell nieces correctly. Look at that. Okay, so and then how about her parents? So if she's 30, she's the youngest. She's got parents, both are alive, but they're in their 70s, right? And so you're asking yourself, so what's this have to do with anything? It has everything to do with everything. And so, she has a partner. If it's committed, what's going to happen to the relationship when she's gone for this long? And it's very interesting. Over the last several years that I've run the case in the classroom, the increasingly the young female students are like, get rid of them, just get rid of them, right? You're going to have a great time, get rid of them. And so it's really an interesting conversation, right? And but you know what? Assuming you don't get rid of them, what's the potential impact to the relationship, right? We all know relationships require time, and but that's up to you to decide, right? She have a small dog. If she has a small dog, who's going to take care of the small dog? And for these extended periods of time. Now, I just had to board one of my dogs. We've got two, and they're both boys, and they like to scrap. Except one's much bigger than the other one, and so the big dog scraps a little bit harder. And we were gone for several days, and so I didn't want them to scrap while my son was home and had no idea what to do. Although he's a grown man, he's still, you know. Um, so we boarded them, and it was like 135 bucks a day, to put them into a doggy hotel. And so, if you're going to board the dog, it's going to be very, very expensive. And then he came back. He was weird. We were only gone for 3 or 4 days, and he was weird for several days. And so, sometimes boarding is good, sometimes it's not. It just depends on the relationship she has with the dog. It's easier if it's a cat, right? But what are you going to do? And so, she's the youngest at three. She's got four nieces and nephews. Why is that such a big deal? And because there's birthdays. And when unless you have children of your own, your nieces and nephews, they become like direct extensions of you. So pretty good chance that she's going to miss a couple birthdays. And depending on when this is going on, right? She might be working up until like the 23rd of December. I've been there, right? And so, what's that going to be like? And and what sort of an impact is that going to have on her if she's missing these birthdays and these big family moments and summer barbecues? These are all part of the things that sort of make us, make our lives meaningful. What's it going to be like, right? And then, so if we've got parents in their 70s, what do we know about parents in their 70s, right? They start falling and they get hurt and they have, hospital visits, right? Not all of them, but I got to tell you, uh, increasingly, that's when things start to happen. So if we start to paint this picture of what Mary's life looks like, it begins to, you've got to blend it with the economic opportunity. And so now let's take a look at the opportunity, right? So I put together this little map of the United States, and so let's see if I can fit it in within this little box so we can see the whole thing. So let's assume she's in San Jose. So this is the scenario, right? She's got 10 clients, six are on the East Coast, two in the Midwest, two are on the East Coast, on the West Coast. So let's assume there's one in San Jose, one in LA. These are easy. She can get up in the morning, Monday morning, catch that 6:20 flight out of San Jose, get down to LA, be in the office by 9 a.m. at the LA client. The San Jose client, piece of cake. However, the Boston client, you got to assume she's got to be at work on Monday 9 a.m. So to get to Boston by 9 a.m., it's either a red eye, which are brutal, right? Or she's got to leave. There's like 3 o'clock flight out of San Jose, San Francisco, and get her in there about 11, 12 o'clock into Boston. Same thing with New York. And you get to the hotel, you get to the airport. Let's call it 11. You get to the after you get your bag, let's call it you're in the Uber and you're in the hotel by 12:30. Except your brain and your body thinks it's 9:30 because of the time change. So it's going to take you a little while to get to sleep, but you still got to get up and be in the office by 9 a.m. And you got to hustle that whole week. You're done at the client's office by 6. The question is, do you fly home? Let's assume the clients are paying for all the expenses. So that's the economics of the travel is not the variable. It's the do you fly home or do you stay in Boston for the weekend so that you don't have to go through all that travel again? Because if you fly home, then you leave the client's office by 6, right? You're going to try to get to the airport so you can get like maybe an 8 o'clock flight. I know out of Boston, there's like a 8:20 flight that'll get you back into San Francisco, right? So same thing. You get back in. It's about 11 o'clock. You get home and you wake up on Saturday morning. What's the first thing you got to do, right? You got to go to the dry cleaners so you can have your clothes dry cleaned so you can pick them up Saturday afternoon, and then you got the rest of the day and you get to hang out and you go to barbecues and whatever. Or do you stay in Boston? And do you stay in Boston over the weekend and then do you just stay in Boston for a month because you got 2 clients there? Same thing with New York. Do you just stay in New York for a month? Do you just go to the East Coast and stay on the East Coast? So for 2 months, you're just going to knock out the Boston, New York clients, or are you coming back? Because the coming back is brutal. I don't know how many of you have done this, but I used to do this all the time. I think the last time I looked, I've got just under 800,000 miles in the air. And it begins to take a toll, right? Even you can get the noise canceling headphones. And if you can learn to sleep on a plane, which I've not learned how to do, it begins to take a toll and it wears on you. And so, do you just stay? And if you stay, don't forget, right? We've got this is her life, right? She's got her partner and her small dog and nieces and nephews. And we've got summer barbecues and birthdays, and my parents are getting hurt. How do we begin to fit this, which is where all the clients are, into this picture, right? And I'm not trying to discourage anybody from doing this. That's not my point. My point is that we have to factor all these into the equation. How could she do this? Well, we know from the case because the reality is we can only make decisions with information in the case. There's nothing in the case to indicate she's going to get paid enough where she can have an assistant. There's nothing in the case to indicate that she could hire somebody else to maybe go do the East Coast stuff. She can't, right? This is when you're starting something from the ground up and you are bootstrapping. So there are personal challenges associated with this that have nothing to do with the fact that this is probably truly a banging idea. And so when you're going through and you are assessing whether this is a viable opportunity or not, you got to factor that into the equation. And the reality is if she's really in a committed relationship, then that person is going to be supportive. And if she's going to stay in Boston for a month, nothing says that they can't pop out for a week and another week when she's in New York. Talk about fun, right? She goes to work and the partner gets to go bump around Boston, and then she gets off work. They go have dinner and hang out. Nothing says that this couldn't, be sort of like a small little vacation thing. And nothing says that. And she knows when the nieces and nephews. She knows when their birthdays are. So nothing says that she can't just be home for that weekend, right? And so she can work it out, but it's not going to be easy. And as we know, entrepreneurship is not easy. And so I wanted to start off with this case study just because, we need to start off with the assessment. Are we, and it's not just do I have the technical knowledge and is it going to make money and do we think that it's a great long term viable business opportunity? We really do have to factor into the equation the personal elements of our life. And so one of the reasons why I now teach is after I sold my last company, during that time, we adopted our son Brandon, and he was 7.5 at the time. And I sold my company. He was 11, and so the company that bought me, they were in North Carolina, and so I'd have to go to North Carolina once a month. It was not a big deal. I took him with me several times. He loved it. And but then they bought a bigger company that had a big European presence, and they asked me to manage global sales, which meant that now every 4 to 6 weeks I was in Europe, and so I was traveling a lot. And during that time, I got together with a small team of people. We came up with a really interesting business idea, and I pitched it to the London Stock Exchange, who was a client and had a good friend there. And we were getting ready to start another company. And one of my personal assessments was, okay, if this company is really going to be based in London, because that's where our core client is, I'm going to have to be there a lot. And so either A, we've got to move the family, which is a massive undertaking, and or I'm just going to be gone a lot. And we had just adopted this kid, and so one of the personal assessments for me was, man, I kind of want to be home and see my little guy grow up, and I want to be able to do those dad things. And so, and right around that time, the college had a full-time tenure track position open up. It was literally all these things were converging at the same time, and for me, the assessment was easy. And I've never looked back. And so, you have to really sort of put yourself in the shoes of Mary and sort of figure out how would you do this. And that's why this isn't just a slam dunk, super easy case study. Because if you're only looking at the economics, it's a no brainer. But you can't, because this is real life. All right, hope this was helpful. If you've got questions, you guys know how to find me. Send me an email, send me a text, and enjoy the case. Peace.